It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Pure Performance. As always, with me is my co-host, Andy Grabner. Andy, do you know why? I'm not even going to ask you if you know why it's a special episode. I'm going to go old school on you. If you remember back in the beginning, and any of our loyal listeners who've been with us since the beginning might remember we used to have trivia, right, Andy? You remember? And nobody ever answered. We got one answer.
Really?
Ever.
Ooh, after what? After a year and a half?
Yeah. Anyway, so we stopped doing the trivia way back. But Andy, so here's the trivia just to you, right? Mm-hmm. So right now, my parents are in Hawaii on their 50th wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. What does that have to do with today's show?
Maybe it is our 50th show.
Correct.
Woo! Look at that. So what do I win now?
You win the privilege of continuing to breathe. You wouldn't have lost it. You wouldn't have lost it, but that's about all I can guarantee. That's about all I can give you is.
All right. Cool.
So anyway,
so what else is happening?
What else is happening? Well, we've got Perform coming up, right?
Yeah, exactly. We are busy. You're doing hot days, I believe, and podcasting.
Yeah. So if you want to come meet me in person, I will not give autographs. Not that I would expect to ever do that, because that's the most ridiculous thing. But I would just think it would be hilarious. So maybe I think we'll probably get some joker like Brian Chandler if he shows up asking me for one. And yes, that's a call out to Brian Chandler. But yeah, I'm going to be doing a couple of hot days there, and I will be co-hosting the live podcast with the folks from Perf Bytes. And you're going to be doing some presentations as well, right?
Yeah, we're currently, and this is a shout out to all of our listeners. So Perform is at the end of January, last week in Vegas, and it's already an amazing lineup of presenters that we have. We're still looking for some speakers. So if you have any exciting topic around, moving to the cloud, containers, microservices, AI, IoT, mobile, UEM, then let us know. Just send an email. Or go to perform.dynatrace.com and figure out. But please, if you have a chance, go to Vegas. It's not only a fun town, but I think it's going to be a great week to learn. We have 1 day of hot training day, so hands-on training day, and then 2 weeks of the conference itself with a lot of breakouts. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. But more exciting for me is actually the guest that we have today.
Oh, please tell us.
Yeah, because I know he's been sitting idle there and waiting, and he says, "And when are they finally done with their intro?" So I wanna introduce Markus Heimbach. Markus is a colleague of ours from our Linz lab in Austria, and the reason why I brought Markus, invited him, is in June. I think was it June, Markus? Dev 1.
Hi guys. I think it was 1st or 2nd of June this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dev 1 is our Dynatrace conference from developers to developers, and we open it up also to the public. And Markus did an amazing talk about how his team has transformed over the last couple of years and is now doing a lot of infrastructure automation. And the slides are up on SlideShare, so we will post the link there. But Markus, without further ado, I would love to hear from you. First of all, who you are, what you do are at Dynatrace, and kind of what has transformed in your team within Dynatrace and the service that you provide to the engineering team.
Thanks, Andy. As you said, we are basically running the whole environment where our great product Dynatrace is being developed and built. We have basically 2 labs in Linz and in Gdansk, Poland, where we have a large CI running, continuous integration. My team is just a couple of guys. We are five team members, and we run barely 100 machines across the 2 labs. And meanwhile, we have about 900 machines running in average, mainly of them are virtual machines, and of course we're also using Docker very heavily. So we orchestrate around 100 Docker containers a day for our continuous integration, testing and building, and various other topics where we are leveraging the Docker environments. And as Dynatrace itself is running on various platforms, we're also responsible for keeping and provision new machines across all known operating systems and architectures. And just to name a few, it's Solaris Spark, it's IBM AX, IBM mainframe, and even though it's Linux on set, so it's a very large variety of very interesting platforms, and we try to make that as continuous and as automated as possible, and bring the automation even to those ancient operating systems like Solaris and IX.
Mm-hmm. So that means I don't have to write you a letter in case I need a machine, and it takes a week or two or a month until I get my machine. It's a little more automated than that.
A little bit, yes. Yeah. Of course, it's depending on what platform we are running. If you're just heading for a Linux system running on some x86 environment, you can create it on your own. We have an own private cloud running where we have some prepared images, and these are around 250 meanwhile, where we have pre-baked images provided for each developer to reproduce some bugs or to test some build environment without really going in the CI and breaking the build. And if it's a little bit more on the older systems like the Solaris environments, we don't have the full automation for the developers as a self-service yet, but we are working on that. But for us, it takes roughly 5 minutes to ramp up a new AX LPAR or a new Solaris LDOM. So it's a matter of couple of minutes instead of weeks.
And do you automate spinning up the mainframe?
Yes, that would be nice, but I think IBM has some problems in terms of cost and licensing and that. But it would be a nice topic. Actually, if you think about Linux, this is even actually possible, as there are some cool HMC, it's called in the IBM world, where you have and control host running in front of the mainframe. Mm-hmm. And there we are able to provide a set Linux LPAR also very quickly, as we are leveraging there a set VM. And there it's also possible to sort of automate it, or at least to reduce the manual amount to a minimum.
Yeah, I thought I was making a stupid joke, and joke's on me, as always, Andy.
Yeah. And Marcus, so the service that your team is providing, as I understand, obviously all the automation for developers so they can stand up the environments when they need them. For CI, what about production? Do you also provide the same services for our production environment?
Not for our product itself. So Dynatrace hosted in our Amazon environments is not handled within my team, but we run a different sort of production environment, and this is our website and all subsequent parts of that. So the blog, the documentation, and all this stuff, and this is also fully automated and is running solely within AWS.
Cool, pretty cool. So how long have you been with Dynatrace? I don't even know how many years.
I made my 6th year this year.
When? I just had 6 years too. When was yours?
1st of July.
Okay, mine was 26th of September. Well, there we go.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah, so, it had been very interesting, and it was a great experience to be part of this amazing team.
Yeah. How was Dynatrace 6 years ago in that area? Because I assume that many of our listeners, I'm not sure how many are where you are, probably not all of them. That's why they're probably somewhere in the middle between what you experienced 6 years ago and where you are right now. So maybe we can tell us a little bit about the challenges or the situation that was there, whether there were challenges and how you kind of went to the stage where you are right now. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Honestly, 6 years ago, I was in a different team. Then I was in a very small team, and we provided a customer self-service named eServices, and we provided a Java web application, and we did all the deployments manually days back. So copying over the WAR file to the web server and doing the rollout of the new version and manually rolling back and all these kinds of things, But then I was enabled to switch the team, and we were migrating the test automation team more specifically, and there I had the chance to switch to the infrastructure part of the test automation. And there I got the first experience with Amazon, and I think this was something like 2012 or something, where we started also our first projects with AWS. And they were the first, touching points with infrastructure automation and infrastructure as code. But in our lab, it was very horrible. So we had a lot of handcrafted and Snowflake servers where barely any documentation was available. So some guy did set up a Ubuntu system in that way, or a Red Hat system in another way, and it was very snowflakey. And of course, we had a documentation in our wiki, but as always, the documentation is outdated or misleading in the worst case. And we had servers with the big one and you name it, like the even bigger one, and these types of server, or we had a par risk for HBUX, and we had a power serve for a Linux system running on power and so on. So it was very, very snowflakey, as we say nowadays.
Yeah, I've never heard that term before. That's kind of saying
really?
delicate? Yeah, I mean, I've heard people being called snowflakes, right? That's very common over here when you have the left and the right attacking each other. But I've never heard a machine called a snowflake. That means it's pretty delicate and can fall over at any time, I guess, something along those lines.
Yes. Yeah, it's basically that it's a very unique system.
Unique, okay.
And it's set up manually, so there is no documentation in terms of code where you see
it's one of
what
a
is
kind.
on the. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And there's a very prominent guy out there. It's Martin Fowler, who basically, I'm not really sure if he provided that term, but he's very keen on infrastructure automation and serverless and all the new orchestration and deployment mechanisms we have right now.
Okay.
And it was just horrible. And of course, we were running VMware days back. And if you needed a new VM with a similar use case, you just took a running VM, you went into the web UI or in the rich client and said, clone me this VM. So you had even the case that you had running VMs and you made a hot clone of that. And of course, as it was not documented what is on the system, you ended up with failing builds or failing tests. As there were some hidden configurations on the system which you didn't expect to be there, or you had some missing parts what you expected to be there. So it was, if we look back now, it was very horrible. So this is the bad story we have to tell on that.
There's a good point there, right? That a lot of times people might look at setting up all this automation that you're going to be talking about a little bit more of, right? But that's going to take time, and we're not going to be able to get things done because we have to, divert our attention from building machines to setting up and testing our automation. But just that story you're telling, you go back in time, how much? I mean, this is more of a rhetorical question, but just think about how much time is wasted troubleshooting these hot clones that you're setting up, all these machines that have all these snowflakes, a new term I'm going to start using there all the time now. You're setting up all these snowflakes, right? That things don't work, and you don't know then if it's because of the code or anything else you've pushed to it, or as you said, there's some weird configuration file, or God forbid, something as simple as a host file that you spent 3 days looking everywhere else and didn't even check to see that there was something in the host file. Right? So much wasted time going back. I mean, I remember in my old testing days dealing with all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
That when you switch it over, you're going to have to put some upfront time into automating it. But as you know, we have in the notes for talking about in here, even like you have the immutable infrastructure, so that every time you spin something up, you're spinning up a fresh, clean one. And so if something doesn't work, don't even try to fix it. Just start over, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's even worse. It's not only that you as a person who made the clone is responsible for finding the glitch. It's more or less as you grow as a company, some developers are looking why the build is failing or why the test is failing. And in the worst case, it's not only one developer, it's 10, 20 or 50 developers, because you can't be certain what was the problem. And then all these working power is burned for something very easy to fix. Of course, you have to make it in the first place, but in the end, it's not only the productivity of the infrastructure team, but it's the whole company or the whole development team, actually, which is enabled to be more productive and can focus on providing new features for our products and for value for our customers. So this is not only within the team itself, it's the whole company, basically, which also is enabled to work better and more efficiently.
Yeah, and also the thing is trust, right? If you cannot trust the system because you don't know which result it produces, then, well, why use a system that you don't trust? And then people go off and do their own thing because they don't trust you. And then it's even worse, because then you have like people that are creating something on the side that you should actually be providing.
Yeah. And additionally, maybe it's also interesting is if I look back, we're roughly the same team size. So we had roughly 5 or even 6 guys running the team, and we had about 40 to 50 VMs and 5 to 10 hosts, something like that, or even the ratio is a little bit more on the bare metal side. So we wouldn't even able to scale in the dimensions we have right now without really scaling the team equally. So we would now end up in a team with 20 employees to just keep the environment up, and this would be even worse in a way that you are not able to really work on the environment because you're just firefighting. We had the term days back that we had just a couple of guys across several teams doing firefighting, as it was so complex to find failures or to pinpoint problems that we even had this firefighting team, and it was each time you had to make that, it was horrible because you hardly were able to get something productive because you are just running from failure to failure, and most of the times it's really hard to find the real root cause, and then it could be some VM being moved around and then some storage IOPS. I don't know. There were several problems, or a VMware host was overutilized, and then there was some network congestion and so on. That was just horrible.
Mm-hmm. Hey, there's actually 2 questions that I have. I mean, the first thing is, are you using Dynatrace now to actually monitor the complete infrastructure? Do you have one agents installed?
Yes, of course. We are running both, especially on the more ancient systems, and that I mean Z-Linux and Solaris Spark, where we just got the one agent being developed. I think we are now in somewhat beta phase or alpha phase for the one agent on Solaris. As we don't had them already available, we are running Appmon on these environments, Dynatrace Appmon, and using the host agent or the special agent depending on the software we are running there. And on all new environments, we rely on our one agent and the technology and the insight the agent is providing.
Cool. Oh, that's great. I've been telling our Dynatrace story for the last couple of months at different events, and I always tell about the DevOps transformation and that we use our own products, right? Eat your own dog food, or as we'd like to call it, drink our own champagne.
Of course,
much better. Yeah. So that's great. Now, the question that is really, I think, interesting for many listeners is, so you were in a situation where you had these snowflakes and everything was more chaotic and you wasted too much time in firefighting. How did you change that, and what were kind of the steps and to get there? Kind of some advice and things you've done.
Yeah. Basically, as I stated previously, we had some touching points with Amazon days back, where we had seen how easy it could be to provision a very vanilla instance and create all your stuff on that vanilla machine. We thought, how can we get that in our environment? And something like configuration management was also introduced and was founded days back. And we took the first step with Puppet, as Puppet is able to run on all our systems. As I said in the beginning, we have a large variety of different operating systems and architectures, so we need a tool which is able to run everywhere where we need it to run. And Puppet is the only configuration management tool which is capable of running on all our operating systems. And we started with them to make some small changes on the systems, like providing some JDKs. Of course, Dynatrace is a Java company mainly, so we also have some building and stuff around with Java. And we used it to deploy our JDKs onto the build machines and test machines and so on. And of course, even though it's just a small piece and a seemingly easy one, just copy over a zip file, unzip it, place it somewhere, and you're happy. Even that had some dramatic impacts and disruptions in our CI. As you might think, you change a JDK, so a build is running using a specific JDK, and now Puppet is running, replacing the JDK, causing a build failure. Or the JDK unzip, of course, uses some I/O as it has to write the files to disk. It has some network utilization and so on, causing also side effects to our tests. For example, we have some very specific unit tests where you have some 50 milliseconds timeouts and so on. And if you applying some configurations during that time frame, the builds are doomed to fail, basically. And on those problems, you don't think in the first place, because you think you just apply something and what could possibly go wrong, and you think nothing, because it's just providing something new or something reliably on a very specific case. This is one part. So the side effects when you apply a configuration into a sort of production environment. The other one is that even though you install Puppet on a system, the underlying system was a snowflake. So you changed something, like putting a JDK in a specific directory, but the configuration of the build environment was assuming that the JDK is running somewhere differently. So there were some glitches and problems we had to work around. And we learned a lot from them. So like detecting if a build is running, or we basically force the applying of a configuration very regularly. Normally we have a configuration run every 30 minutes. And if a node is very utilized, we force it that it at least runs once a day, so that we can be sure that our configuration is being applied. And we don't have a configuration drift. This is also something very important, that you run the configurations and the settings constantly and continuously. There's also a term founded or created by Martin Fowler, that you create a configuration drift if you say you create an instance, you configure it for a certain purpose, and then you never check if the configuration has changed. And for sure, there will some guy connecting to the machine, making some change in the registry or in a hosts file, or creating some fancy shell script, doing some fancy stuff, and you don't recognize that if you don't constantly apply your environment settings on these machines.
That's pretty cool. Hey, and I remember this from your slides where you said, for us, it is actually a security issue. Or there's an alert going off if somebody logs in to one of these machines, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a thought, now thinking about our product, Dynatrace, and we do automatic log analytics, wouldn't it be cool if we just by default, every time we see that somebody logs into a machine, we create an event that feeds into our AI?
That's something you can do already. So with the custom alerting and the log agent, you are able to do exactly that you have some patterns where you search for, and then you can trigger an event within Dynatrace.
Perfect. And you can then also apply this, obviously, to particular types of machines. I'm sure you can do this tag-based, because maybe you have some machines in your infrastructure that are for quote-unquote common use, but then you really want to kind of seal certain machines that you automate all the time.
Yeah, of course. We have some machines where you have to log in because you're running tests remotely. For example, some very rare systems like the mainframe where you don't have that many around, right? Mm-hmm. So there's something where you are sharing the system. So the test or the build environment is remotely logging in. There you are expecting these sort of things. But as you said, on the other hand, you can be very specifically on machines where you don't want anybody to connect to the machine.
So in the example then that you talked about, when someone goes in and changes some environmental variables or something, right? I'm sure there are times when you use your automation, use your configuration to spin something up, and let's say it's a new version of an OS or anything else where you find out that your old configuration doesn't work right. So, obviously it makes sense at that point, maybe. And I'm kind of asking this more, is this your process, or how do you go about doing this? Let's say it does make sense to go in there and mess around with the environments to set them properly. Would the best practice then be figure out what the settings are supposed to be, then destroy that server, update the configuration, and then deploy it with the new settings that you figured out, kind of in your experiment? Or how do you handle those situations then?
Yeah, that's right. So that's the new approach we are running since roughly 1.5 years, or maybe meanwhile 2 years, that we moved away from trying to keep systems up to date, because, as you said, we have a large team, and you will have some manual configurations, and you cannot track every change on the system, and the other thing is some tests are modifying parts of the operating system or parts of the application we are testing. Mm-hmm. So there's a trade-off. You cannot track all changes in an environment. And we also learned that, and there is a sort of new approach, and this is the immutable infrastructure term. And what we are doing here is basically we are using a very awesome product from HashiCorp named Packer, where we are creating all our VMware images, or not VMware, but virtualized environments. We can use VMware, we can use KVM, which we're heavily using. We can use even AMIs for Amazon. Mm-hmm. And there we create very unique and very specific images for each use case we have. And if we change something like a new JDK or we need a new GCC, we just create a new image out of our configuration, and then we are replacing all our running instances which are originating from that very specific type of image, and replacing it with a new version of that. And we are also going a step further. We are not only replacing the images or the running virtual machines after a change, but we also constantly are replacing machines without any change. just to circumvent these configuration drift problems. So in our lab, the developers know that our machines are replaced constantly. So if they need a change to be made permanently in our lab, in our environments, they can either make the change on their own, as we have everything running in Git, so they can just fork it, can create a pull request, doing the review, and then we enable our developers basically to enable their own environment and maintain their requirements on their own. And we are and replacing them very, very often. Even we have no change, just to make sure to have no configuration drift and no side effects on our build and our test environment.
Great.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So what I just learned. So immutable infrastructure, right? HashiCorp is one of the companies. I know we use HashiCorp and we love them. Any other products in that space that others would use, that others people may know about?
Yeah, of course, we are using Puppet, as I said in the beginning, and Pekka can utilize different provisioners in that area. But as we have a very strong and solid Puppet background, we are also using Puppet to configure these images. And other than that, we are of course using Ansible to roll out complex and integrated software like Red Hat OpenShift, which we are also supporting, and to provide environments for our developers and for our CI. There we're using Ansible and a lot of other products like Gradle and which we are using for our test automation internally. So we have an own CI and the automation behind for our CI automation. So that's something we learned as well. We started with a Puppet and having it in SVN and making changes, rolling them out, and then you end up with a broken CI, because if you change something very critical, something very deep in the system, it's very likely that you have a side effect which you don't see in the first place. And this is also something we learned, and we built up our own test and build environment for our infrastructure code. And as the term says, it's code managing the infrastructure. So you can apply the same software engineering methodologies you use for your Java development. So we have code quality rules. We have static code analysis to see how our code has some conceptual problems and is using some terms you're not supposed to use. And also we are creating our own virtual machines where we can run our new configuration on. So we are very utilizing these terms for our own infrastructure code stuff as well.
Now you mentioned infrastructure, as a service. I mean infrastructure as code. Andy, if you recall going back to episode 29, yes, I did look it up earlier. I have these all just on my head. We had Thomas McGonigal on, and we were talking about network as code. Yeah. I guess my question there for you, Marcus, then is: have you broached into the area as network as code? Does it apply in the environments that you're working in?
Yes. Yeah, of course. We are using it more or less more in our services we are hosting ourselves. Besides running all the infrastructure parts, we are also running some very business critical services for our development cycle, like our centralized code repository and where we place all our build binaries. And these are very crucial to be running all the time. And for that, we are using Kubernetes and providing these services within we are using basically a CoreOS and Flanell for our network layer, which is basically an overlay network. So we can hiding all the inter-cluster communication from the remaining network. So this is more the part we are using it. It's more about hiding cluster internal traffic from the remaining network.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool. Hey, so now you just brought something up, Brian. even though you kind of flip the words, but infrastructure as a service. I look at your title right now, actually. I'm looking at the email that you sent. And it says team lead infrastructure and services. So that means, obviously I understand now what you do, but your team as a whole, if you could sum it up again, not only do you provide infrastructure as a service and all the services that is required to run the complete test automation that supports developers. You also mentioned the website, you run there and some other services. What other services are you providing as a team to the complete R&D organization, just to sum it up? Because that would be interesting to know, what is a team like yours actually providing to the whole organization?
Yeah, it's basically that we try to enable the developers to work very productively and efficiently. So it's like a service organization within the development team. And as I said, it's about try to provide these services like Artifactory, where you host all your binaries which are used for local builds, where the developer are trying their code changes prior to pushing it in the CI, so that you don't generate a failing build. The essential Git repositories and these sort of things. Some database servers where all these services are backed, and it's a very interesting, very comprehensive environment, and it's how so to say, it's demanding, but on the other hand, it's very interesting and makes a lot of fun to work on that and to see these new tools we have right now. So if you think 5 years ago, something like Docker or Kubernetes was not around the corner even. You had some dodgy terms like Linux LXC containers. Even nowadays, I'm sure not every Linux user or experienced Linux user knows about LXC. But Docker is everywhere, and this enabled us a lot to provide very consistent and easy to use images to run important services, because you can test the very same image or the piece of software which went or goes to production prior to going into production. And we are very using development and staging environments to pretty certain that we don't break critical services. And we use them binary identical to be on the safe side. So we push the same images through all 3 stages, and we are able to roll back very easily as we have them prepared. And if something goes down, like storage goes down or a host breaks and the disks are gone, it makes no issue, because we just either there's self-healing due to some automation within Kubernetes, or it's self-healed due to some failover mechanisms we have in place running the services distributed across several machines. And this is just the way we make it.
Cool. And last question that I have, and I think then we probably want to start wrapping up, but when I talk with some of our customers and prospects that are large enterprise organizations, and they have like more traditional operations, traditional teams, teams that handle infrastructure in a traditional way, they always fear that if they become a service organization and they automate a lot of things, like what you said, your developers can just change the configuration in Git and make a pull request, and then they get it. So basically, you automated a lot of the work away. So have you ever had the fear that you're automating your jobs away?
No, definitely not. I'd say it's the way around. If I would have to keep our servers like in the kindergarten, that you have to take care of as a child, and one is whining or had been fallen down, and you have to fix it. It is fun in a small scale, right? But if you run it in a very, very large scale, you are not even able to provide your own business, and you're stuck and you can't advance. And then in the end, your boss will say, how could you basically get your job done? And this won't work if the business of your company is growing and you as an IT team or as a service team, you are responsible to enable the company to grow. And if you can't grow, you basically are one point or the main point of the company to not grow. And so this, I see it other way around. So if you're not able to scale up, the whole company wouldn't scale. And in the end, your boss will fire you. And the important part also is not only about the work, it's also, especially in our time right now, we have so many cool technologies to work on and to learn how to use them. If we had to take care each machine in our environment, we wouldn't have the time to be innovative, to try new things. We would just be stuck on the dark Middle Ages where we started, and then your job wouldn't make fun. And I think fun at work is important. To be innovative and to get out of your box, to try new and of course to fail on new technologies. No one is perfect in new technologies. You have to play with them, to fail with them, and to learn how to really use them. So it's like with Kubernetes, we knew a year ago that we want to go with Kubernetes, but we didn't have any experience with it. And it was a hard trial and error in the first place, especially to get Kubernetes running on premises, right? So to ramp up a Kubernetes cluster in Google Cloud or in Amazon is just that easy, but to really let it run on premises, you have to understand how Kubernetes is working, and that's interesting. And if you don't have the time, you are not able to learn new stuff and to enable you even more and more and more in the new environments.
Yeah, and what you say there with the whole job security thing, it reminds me, again, going back to an older episode, last year at Perform, there's another Perform blog. Come on, people. Last year at Perform, we were talking with Josh McKenty from Pivotal. And someone had asked him about, what does he think Web 3.0 is, right? And he said, I don't care about Web 3.0. I care about Web 4.0. And then I think I'm paraphrasing what it was. The general idea there was he doesn't want to have to think about the internet anymore. Any device, anything he's using, there should not even be a thought of, well, am I connected to the internet? What's my bandwidth? It's all just, it's part of the fabric, the fabric of life at that point. And if you think about operations in the same way, right, back when you were doing it all the manual way, everything else, people know operations exists because it's a pain point for everybody. Yep. It's you all there, all hours of the night, all hours of the weekend, holding things up because you don't have another bare metal server to spin up. Maybe you've even gone to VMware, but your hypervisors are full and you need to order another server, or your backlog with a million change, all this other kind of stuff, right? It's a huge pain point. And hey, people know you exist and you're the only ones who can get through it. So there's your job security kind of a way, but it's an awful setup. Whereas the relation I'm making to this whole like Web 4.0 kind of thing is a great team is invisible, right? The operations team should be invisible to the organization. People should even say, oh, we have operations. And the answer is like, well, who do you think's running this great thing that's transparent? It's all that operations team that's making it happen, right? And it doesn't obviously happen by itself, no matter what you have automated. The automation is more for the end users. And yeah, you can have bits and pieces automated to make your job easier, keeping it up and running. But that's that constant tweaking. That's where that maintenance comes in. That's where all that the piece goes in. So yeah, the goal should be disappear, right?
Absolutely.
Not to lose your job, but be so people don't even know you exist in a way, right? And then of course, if it's running so well, you can just like sit back and watch a movie during the day and.
or get on new technologies. So basically you are a proxy and a gatekeeper, and if the proxy does not perform or the gatekeeper does not perform, then you are basically you're not accelerating the business. You're just a pain point, as you said.
Yeah. So Andy.
Very cool. Marcus, is there anything kind of thing that we missed? I know we kind of had our talk track, or we knew what we wanted to say. Is there anything that final words that you want to say?
Yeah, I think just the important stuff is some lessons learned. It's basically the sum of what I told is really be keen on automation. It's just something you should really invest on, and there's a very prominent XKCD about that, where you have some sort of a metrics shown. Is it worth to automate something? So if it's sort of you make a task only once a year and it takes you 5 minutes, of course, there's no need to automate it. But if it's just a task, a 5-second task a day you have to do in the morning, I don't know, make certain command to get, to ramp up a certain service in the morning. This is something you definitely want to automate. And this is the key in our life, to really be automating, because if you automate it, you know it, you have to understand it, and you are implicitly documenting it, because documenting the code itself is sort of a document, like a run book, how you deploy an application or how you deploy a server. The code itself is the truth. Every document running residing in a wiki is just doomed to be outdated, because no one else will update the wiki after he has finished his story. So, and the code itself is the truth. And I think that is my story to tell. Automate.
Cool. All right. Brian, shall I summarize?
Let's do it.
Yes, the summarator. So for me, what I like the best, what you said, applying general development principles, software development principles to the way we think about infrastructure, right? Talked about you have a full test automation suite that actually tests your infrastructure as code. More importantly, on top of that, what you really do as a team, you are providing services to other parts of the organization that are fully automated, so that you are not the bottleneck in keeping them from innovation. And because you automate so much, you actually have the time to look into your own innovation, so that you make sure that the services you provide next year are up to date and allow them to keep innovating. So yep. I love the story. Great where we came from and where we are. Some good references to tools that we are using, and some kind of new terms that Brian learned. Right, I'm sure he will cover that in his summary. We want to make sure that people go to dev1.at. You will find Marcus's presentation, both slides and video. We'll put the links up there as well. And my last plug, Perform. It's the third time now. Also join us at Perform, because there will be topics like this as well covered. And that's it from my side. Brian.
Well, yes, Snowflake. It's so funny because I've only heard it in that horrible other way. But yes, I love the idea of this unique server. Another term that didn't come up in the show, but in the notes Marcus sent us over, I saw in your lessons learned, it said Docker is awesome, but orchestration sucks. K8S. And I'm like, what the heck is K8S? So, of course, I had to look it up. And I guess I've been seeing these pop up before. That's an abbreviation for Kubernetes, which is actually has a name. It's a numeronym, or where you replace. I mean, I just think it's ridiculous, but I guess it's what all the hip kids are doing nowadays, huh? At least they don't call it K8S. That would be even more confusing, just for typing. But for anyone who sees words with letters, it's called. You can say to somebody, "Hey, but do you know what that is called?" And they might be like, "Oh, I don't know." You could say it's a numeronym, and then you could feel like a smart old person for a moment, if you're old and listening. No, I think one of the key things you have, we touched upon here and there is, everything you talk about. Whenever I listen to these discussions, right, it's overwhelming, because if you think about, we're hearing you in your final stage, right? But this was, how many years did you say this project's been going on for? I know you've been with the company for 6 years, but you all started this how many years ago?
Yeah, I think roughly 4.5 years, something like that.
Right, and that's important, because when you hear the finished story, right, if you're going on that journey, you start thinking like, holy cow, how do we get this all done in one bang? Right. And it's not, it's making those small changes, doing a little bit at a time, add one layer in, then add another layer in. Because if you go for that full bang, maybe you'll get lucky, but chances are you'll say, oh, we have to make a tweak because we got it all kind of running, but now we have to tweak it. And you have to make a tweak somewhere right at the very beginning, which means you have to make a tweak layer after layer after layer after layer after layer, because that one tweak has like a huge impact on the rest of the line. You know, start small, make small changes. And then as you go, it's going to be a lot easier to make a tiny change to something else towards the beginning of the line that you can adjust for before you get finished. And just even from that point of view, it's never going to be an overnight thing. So take your time. I just know I get overwhelmed even listening to these, you know, thinking about the amount of work involved, but it pays off. And again, try to make it so, you know, you become invisible. You know, my thought of it is if I were a CTO and I couldn't recognize the operations team, that meant they were doing an awesome job because they were never in the firefights, you know? Yeah. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. Anything else from anybody?
Marcus, I think we also want to, I know you said there's other topics, you know, we heavily leverage the cloud, whether it's AWS or other cloud services, and I think we should invite you back to talk about this as well, because that's very important for our listeners as well.
Yes.
I think so, yes, especially the website stuff. I think we provided really cool solutions for our problems, and I think it's worth next podcast somewhat in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And if anybody has any comments or stories or ideas or anything, you can reach us. You could tweet us at either at GrabNeander. No, did I just
almost
at GrabNearAndy, or I'm at Emperor Wilson. We also have at what's the pure
at pure_DT.
Yes, at pure_DT. We'd love to hear from you, ideas, feedback, anything. Marcus, do you do Twitter or anything where you have any other blogs? I know we have the slideshare. We're going to put up anything else you'd like to share with people?
I'm more the participant and read more tweets, so I'm not that heavily providing content.
Yeah, all I do is promote the show on ours too. So, okay. And again, we'll make it number 4, but the reason I'm going to bring up Perform one more time, right? You're going to meet people there that have done all this stuff. So if, like, so many people are at these events, and this we can almost say this could be at any event you go to, right? But there's so many people who've gone through these things, and learning how to do them well really relies on getting that firsthand experience and storytelling from people who've gone through it. So highly encourage it. And that's the last time I will mention it for today. All right. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.